be innocent. Fine, no problem at all. But I think a lot of people, unfortunately, got sucked into this sort of fashionable hacker/elite, presumed that running this JavaScript, or I think there was a version of it written in Mono as well.
Well, C#, I suppose.
So big part, right. And I think they jumped into this whole ethos of this elite hacker type thing that was seen in the movies, and unfortunately these were the people that became victims or subjects of scrutiny when it hit the fan and the law enforcement services start getting involved. The people that were wise to these caveats to using a denial of service attack program would probably be using somebody else's Wi-Fi connection, might be going elsewhere to an internet cafe or whatever. So that's who I see as being the particular victims in this case. And forgetting about the legality of a denial of service attack, forgetting about the campaigns just for a minute, I think a lot of people would not duped, but I can't think of a proper word now, so it's on the tip of my tongue, but it seduced into coming into this whole thing without being fully educated as to what they were doing. That was my take on.
See, something that just occurred to me just now is whoever made, to me, Anonymous seems, as you said, it's like a group of not so much leaders, but a group of more technical people who know how to write programs, and there's behind them there are an awful lot of people who just get in for the lulz. They just click on a program, double click that, install it, and join in because it's seen as trendy or something. So what imagine the scenario that if some undercover officer from the CIA or something came in and said, you know what, have you guys ever thought about DDoSing sites? Because I can write this program. And the program was never intended to. It was intended to sort of do the job, because it would need to be able to do the job, depending on how strong the site is and whatever. But it was never intended to hide them, so that everyone who's encouraged to download that, oh great, we can jump on. This is a program, because I don't know how to write programs, but there's some guy who can write a program and he's doing it, and it's great, we can do that. And everyone who's encouraged to download it and install it and use it is essentially outing themselves. They're stepping up from the crowd, putting their head above the parapet of the crowd for the authorities in their country to say, right, that's it, sonny, you're nicked. So that's one possibility. Either that, or it's someone in the group has said, well, does anyone know how to write a program that'll do that? And then someone stepped forward and said, yeah, I can do that. And they're just some Windows script kiddie that knows how to bolt together bits and pieces, but doesn't really know very much, and they've been completely incompetent in the way that they've created it, that it doesn't hide people's tracks.
I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't a complicated task. A denial of service attack is pretty much bread and butter. It's pretty simple concept. I think even the non-tech folk, once it's explained to them, can probably grasp the concept in about a couple of minutes maximum.
Of course, you could actually talk about what's it called, sitters or worm sitters, something like that, when people actually sit in a restaurant and try to kind of hijack all the seats and sit there for a long time to basically block people from actually using the services. I've never seen anybody actually do that, but I became aware of this when people were trying to characterize the attacks by Anonymous as people trying to wage a protest or preventing people from accessing the building or something of that sort. And I was trying to give a better analogy of what they did, and I was comparing it to throwing like some small stones at somebody's big window or trying to actually harass. It's a really difficult situation, and I think any person who's experienced a DDoS attack knows it's very distressing to deal with. And it's business aside, this is a digitalization of something that people used to perhaps in some cases do quite legally in the physical sense. So going to a certain conference and hackling a company, or in some cases making sure that nobody can reach the booth of a company, you could actually argue that's kind of what they did. That's at least the sympathizers.
You mean for example the FSF doing that with the Apple Store, taking up the Genius Bar?
In some sense, yeah, but obviously they weren't completely blocking and they actually were doing it in a very, should I say, I suppose polite way. Or but here you also have misuse of network. But it's a very tricky situation. There is a certain risk that people will use the transition to the web to limit what people can do by basically writing laws in a certain way. And of course then comes the questions: what if the DAO service attacks actually came in the form of people just sitting there and hitting refresh on the browser, which they could do, and basically overloading the server by just making lots of legitimate requests with their own machines. And that's always, and I once read about a guy who was doing this in his school, and I think he got not just disciplinary actions, but actually was brought into like the law, for maybe police were called because the kid was just sitting there and he told his classmates to press F5 lots of times until the server was basically made unavailable because it couldn't deliver. That's basically what it is. That's what a denial of service attack is. So in some sense, you could think of it as unless you hijack somebody else's computers to do so, and that's something else. That's more of a zombie attack than just that.
Well, I mean, I've just got one final point to make on it. My example that I use for people when explaining a DDoS attack is very simply, you've got a shop and you've got one doorway in, and you try to get all the customers in through the door at the same time instead of single file. And that is the best way I find to describe a denial of service attack. You can't get anybody in the shop when they all try to get in at once. The one final point I have on the whole thing of Anonymous is that if we're to believe, and like I said, there's no reason why we should be doubting anybody, and I don't want to cast aspersions or suggest anybody is being less than honourable, but if we're to believe that Anonymous is as free, as participatory as possible, and there's no hierarchy or ranking structure, and obviously it's a collective effort, it seems to me to be a lot of faith to put into Anonymous themselves that they're doing the right thing. If it was free and open and everybody could contribute and everybody had a part and nobody was in charge, that's a lot of power for any particular person who may have untoward intentions to have at their disposal. I mean, obviously we've seen Anonymous go after the Visa and all that, and they've had reasons for doing that. Now, whether you agree with them or not, and I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs and whether people agree or not, but obviously there was a reason behind that. Now, it could, one could argue, be used for other, maybe darker motives. If somebody had an agenda, for example, or if somebody had motives that weren't in the interests of openness and and freedom, which Anonymous seem to represent. That is another concern of mine.
Just on that, imagine if someone did manage to infiltrate the sort of the decision making at Anonymous to decide who to go after. And imagine they said, right, okay, we're going to try to take down FBI.com or whatever it is, the FBI's site. And every day, and we're just going to target them. And of course, that could be could well be an FBI agent infiltrating them to target all them to say, right, why go to the effort of going to raiding other servers and other ISPs to get logs of these people, when we can just infiltrate them and get them to target us and prepare our resources for a time that we choose to get this information, and then we'll have all this information to say, right, let's get the overtime slips in, and let's go raiding and pick these people up.
And again, that's probably one of the better scenarios, because if we were to take it to another extreme, it could be another country with another motive. There could be all sorts of issues or implications.
Did you hear about William Hague was talking in Munich, I think, about how I'm not sure which department it is, the British government basically had been cracked by the Chinese crackers. And as I think we discussed this before on the shows, in one of the shows, that the British government tends to use Windows and tries to adjust to the use of Windows by choosing everything else from Microsoft, things like Office and SharePoint and whatnot. And what happened is they basically managed to get into the system. Now, as we know from WikiLeaks, and it is an important leak, the hackers who are associated with the Chinese government have access to the source code of Windows. And that leads you to suspecting, well, any government which uses computers with Windows on them is going to be very susceptible to attacks. And I had this discussion just yesterday at work. We were talking about to one of the main administrators, the IT administrators, and I was explaining to her that one of the computers that I happen to use has a password and username user. Yeah, and that's a huge security entrant. Well, any person who's just trying to